Today's episode is all about the power of poo. Yes, it's a shitty episode and it's awesome. You're going to learn so much. Don't forget, we're interactive, so make sure you check the show notes below. Otherwise, let's get this party started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dog Happy. I'm Missy. I am super excited for today's guests. It's Dr. Holly Ganz and Carlton Osborne from AnimalBiome.com, the leading pet microbiome research and product company. Before starting AnimalBiome in 2016, Holly studied animal microbiomes at UC Davis and UC Berkeley. Carlton and Holly are married, high school sweethearts, and Carlton takes charge of the business side of things, giving Holly more time to focus on the science. Welcome. I'm excited to have you both on the show today. I think the products that your company, AnimalBiome.com, offer are quite amazing, and we will get into the specifics of those. But before we do, can you tell us what a microbiome is?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us, Melissa. So a microbiome may not be something that you hear every day, but it's a community of microorganisms, which includes bacteria, fungi, protozoa, viruses, and other tiny things that live on and in us and on and in our pets. These microbes play important roles, and the most obvious one is in the gut with digestion. So we produce digestive enzymes, but the microbes in our gut produce many more and are really essential for the digestive processes, as well as they produce vitamins. But they also play roles in the nervous system. They produce neurotransmitters, and more than half of the immune system has its function in the digestive tract.
So it's that gut-brain combination. You all started out by a Kickstarter, right? It was the general public that kind of helped you along in this?
That's right.
Yeah, I started a Kickstarter when I was a researcher at UC Davis, initially for cats, Kitty Biome, and then a couple years later, I did Doggy Biome. And that really helped me to both learn about what the healthy microbiome looked like, because people were passionate about like raw feeding or other diets that were healthful. And then there were people who had like chronic digestive problems or other conditions that they were like, please help me. My cat's on a medical merry-go-round with diarrhea and antibiotics. And that's really what led me to leave my research position and start the company to try and really help people. So I've made these sort of tools that I find to be really useful, widely available.
That's wonderful. Thank you for doing that too. So can you tell me a little bit about the products you offer?
Yeah, I'll take that. So we offer two basic kinds of products. It first starts with testing. So it's microbiome testing. As a pet parent, you'd send in a little bit of poop in a tiny tube, and Holly and her team of scientists basically describe all of the bacteria in that poop sample. And they do what's called genomic sequencing. So you look at the DNA of the bacteria and then identify it, and then identify whether there are imbalances. And then our report tells you what you can do to correct those imbalances. And then we also have supplements. And our flagship product is called the Gut Restore Supplement. And it's a fecal transplant in a capsule. Essentially, it's like a stool bank. We have a network of healthy donors. We collect their poop. But first we screen the donors. They can't have any health conditions. They can't be taking any medications, haven't been on antibiotics recently. And they have to have a balanced and healthy microbiome. So then we take their poop, we put it through a process where we freeze dry it and make it into a powder that is then put into the capsules. And so the product, some people think of it as like a probiotic, but it's really much more than that. Maybe Holly can talk a little more about the science behind it, but a probiotic is the actual microbe. It's the thing that should be alive. The prebiotic is what microbes eat, right? So it's like food for the microbes.
Right.
And then there's something called a postbiotic, which is the compounds that the microbes produce that are healthy for us. And so a probiotic is just that middle one, the probiotic, the microbe that needs to be fed and then produce the things that we need to be healthy. A fecal transplant really has all of that. And it's prebiotics, it's probiotics, and it's postbiotics. And so it's a much more complex system. And so that product And Holly can talk more about the study we did, but it's been shown to be quite useful, and over 80% of pet parents say that it improves their pet's clinical signs. And so that's our flagship supplement. And then in August, we launched a new supplement called the Gut Maintenance Plus, which is a probiotic, a yeast probiotic called S. Boulardii, and a compound that targets E. coli. Because one of the things we saw with cats and dogs is that sick cats and dogs is that many of them have high levels of E. coli. And so this product that we came out with in August is designed to target that E. coli and reduce the level of E. coli and reduce the diarrhea. So those are our products.
Oh, nice. So the product that you have, you take your sample of poop and you send it in, and then you all produce a report that tells us it sequences all of the bacteria in our dog's gut, right? Do you want to bring up the report now? And so as we talk about it, we can look at it.
Okay, so this is a report that we did for Darwin. And Darwin was a hard luck case that ended up in a sanctuary in Northern California because he's sort of was abused as a child and is sort of a goofy dude. And so we went in and we rescued him, and he was severely underweight. And so because we're in the business, one of the first things we did was a microbiome test. And so what our report looks at is the overall diversity and of his microbiome. And it looks at how many different types of bacteria are there and how evenly distributed they are. And you can see here that Darwin's overall diversity was a little bit low, but that's just one component of microbiome health, but it's a good place to start. And
do you mind going back up for a second?
Sure.
So what I think is really nice about this is that I don't need to be a scientist to understand it. I mean, it's very clear right there that Darwin is at 1.9, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's below the healthy average of 2.2, which it would help if I wore my glasses while we did it. But so if I get the numbers wrong, it's because I can't see. But so when we first start the report, I don't need to be a scientist. I can just look at the numbers, and as we go through the report, it's going to make more sense. Okay, great. All right.
Also, we provide a free 15-minute consultation with every report. So you can contact us and we'll walk you through it.
Oh, wonderful. That's very helpful.
So what we're doing here is sort of challenging because Holly, before she started AnimalBiome, was a researcher at the UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine and the UC Davis Genome Center. And so there's a lot of science behind this. And it can be challenging to translate that science into language that every pet parent can understand. And that's why we provide the consultation. So if you get your report back and there's anything that doesn't make sense, just shoot us an email and we'll schedule some time to chat with you.
Oh, I'm sure that pet parents will love that. So far, I'm good.
Okay, good. So then we look at the sort of mix of a group of bacteria that are called the phyla of bacteria. And that's like just a organizational group. But one of the things that's interesting about this section is that
I just want to jump in and say, how like back in biology class, there's like kingdom and then there's phylum. So like,
okay,
animals, plants, bacteria, kingdom. Phylum is just the next level down.
And so one nice thing about this part of the report is that this distribution between proteobacteria, firmicutes, Bacteroides, and a few others relates to the food that you're feeding your cat or dog. And so if you're feeding a lot of protein, you should see bacteria that are in the Fusobacteria group, okay? If you're feeding a lot of carbohydrates, you should see a lot of firmicutes. And ideally, you want to see these groups in balance. And when you look at Darwin's report, he only has 3 groups. And most importantly, he doesn't have very much, if any, Fusobacterium. And that's the group that helps dogs and cats digest protein. Okay. And it's really important for dogs and cats. And most humans don't have Fusobacterium in their gut.
One thing that's really caught my eye is that these names are not ones that I'm familiar with when you talk about probiotics. I there's no Lactobacillus or, any of that on here. So is there a difference between the probiotics that are made and what we should be giving our dogs? Are we giving them the wrong kinds of things, or do probiotics transform into these materials?
So probiotics are a useful tool, and people do report that they can help with things like diarrhea, and they do have beneficial microorganisms in them, but the microbes tend to come from soil or human infants and not from dog or cats in particular. And so while they can be helpful, a concern we have about taking probiotics daily in high concentrations is that we believe that they can actually compete with the native microbes that are meant to be providing these functions in healthy cats and dogs. When a dog is sick, then it may be a useful tool to give them probiotics on a daily basis if they can't support a healthy gut flora on their own. But we do have some concerns about the fact that they're not the right species.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so AnimalBiome has the largest database of pet microbiome samples in the world. We've sequenced over 10,000 dog and cat samples. What we found is that healthy adult dogs and cats do not have Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium in their gut microbiome unless it's being supplemented.
Or if you give cats milk, you can get Lactobacillus to come up, but it's normally found in young animals.
Oh, okay.
Not adults.
Yeah.
So the recommendation for probiotic use is not daily to support immune health. It's more of a maybe use it if you have acute diarrhea, that type of thing, to kind of help the body combat it, and then stop it so that the native flora, these materials kind of can repopulate and get themselves back in balance.
That's right. And feed those native flora with good prebiotic fibers.
Yeah. So it starts with what you feed your pet, right?
Okay.
Because most of the digestion that happens in your gut is actually being done by the microbes in the gut. And so what you feed your pet really drives what their microbiome looks like. And so, and when I'll get into this example, you'll see that there's no right food for every dog. Like dogs, for whatever reason, health, genetics, their microbiome has different needs in order to stay healthy. So we've done food studies where we have siblings in the same household switch from one food to another food, and the response to the microbiome differs for those dogs. So even though they're siblings, same type of dog in the same household, they have individual needs, or the microbiome has individual needs, and that's reflected in what they eat. And so in this part of the report, this is like a proxy for are you feeding your dog the right mix of macronutrients, the right mix of protein, carbohydrates, fiber, and fat. Okay. And so Darwin didn't have any health conditions other than being underweight, and so he was otherwise healthy. But we could see from looking at this that what he was eating wasn't fostering a healthy microbiome.
So are there specific microbiomes to dogs, to cats, to humans, so you see it's the same general bacteria in each, so you can kind of gauge what's a healthy microbiome for that particular species?
Yeah. So Holly, you've done a lot of research in this. You should take this one.
So just to stay with fusobacteria, that is a group that in humans was associated with inflammatory bowel disease. But it turns out that in dogs and cats, fusobacteria are much more prevalent. And it's the inverse is true, that dogs with IBD or chronic enteropathies typically have low levels of fusobacteria. So we know that there are differences at the species level of what microbiome composition should look like.
When you're talking about the fusobacteria, does it matter if it's animal proteins or vegetable proteins? Would that affect that level?
I don't think we have a good handle on that yet. It seems to be responsive to both kinds of protein, but there probably are microbiome differences that result.
Yeah. I mean, there's no published studies on this, but anecdotally, we have seen that some pea-based protein foods don't produce as much fusobacterium in the gut as animal-based proteins. Where Holly's saying there needs to be more study, it's not clear that that's unhealthy.
Okay.
But descriptively, that is probably true, that it's just not fostering as much fusobacterium.
But yeast-based proteins actually seem to support fusobacteria as well as other groups of bacteria. So it depends on where the protein is coming from.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so you asked about different microbiomes for cats and dogs and humans. Mm-hmm. And the answer is yes, very clearly. And so we have focused on cats and dogs, and their microbiomes are quite different. There's some similarities, but they're distinct. And so we've identified what is healthy for cats, and it is different than what is healthy for dogs. The groups of bacteria are different, and the proportions are different. Oh. So for instance, in dogs, fusobacterium should be about 20%, whereas in cats, it's closer to 5%. But it is in cats and it is in dogs, just at different levels. Oh. And so here on the left is sort of the average healthy dog. And you can see that it's sort of well-distributed groups, and fusobacterium is typically the largest group. And when we look at Darwin, actually, he had high levels of Prevotella and what we would consider fairly high levels of Megamonas.
And do each of those contribute to a potential problem in the dog?
No. So Prevotella, Megamonas, those are all what we call part of the core healthy microbiome. And so every dog and cat should have each of those in some level. But with Darwin, the Prevotella is fairly high. So in healthy dogs, it's 12.5%. Wow. And in Darwin, it was 44%. So it's the right microbe, but too much of it. And we typically see this when cats and dogs are fed diets that are high in carbohydrates. Okay. And so you see Prevotella start to, take up more and more of the microbiome. And that probably is not going to cause a health condition on its own, but it starts to leave them susceptible to a disruption that could be a problem. So for instance, if a dog with high Prevotella ends up taking antibiotics, they're probably more likely to end up with a dysbiosis than a dog that already had a healthy microbiome.
Okay. Because you don't have that variety to kind of account like for the bounce. Like you need like a springy gut to be able to take a hit and then be able to bounce back. If you're already too far over to one side, that bounce is probably not going to happen. It's probably just going to knock you over, and it's going to be a struggle. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great visual. I'll have to use that in the future. Okay, and so then we go through each of the groups and indicate what the average is and whether it's high or low. And so here we identified Prevotella being high.
And we'd like to see the Bacteroides come up a little bit. It's within the normal range, but there are some ways to increase it by adding fiber to the diet, which is often something that even the dogs on healthy, high protein diets, sometimes they need some more fiber.
Yeah, and so Bacteroides is an important group because they produce anti-inflammatory compounds that reduce the inflammation in the gut as well as the rest of the body. And so often we see animals that have chronic GI problems or skin issues with very low levels of Bacteroides or even missing.
So quick question about that. So I just did an interview about symptoms, and one of the things that surprised me that an ear infection, which because I think it was in the ear, you consider it different from than maybe a skin condition like mange that happens more on a larger scale. But that's all a change in the microbes on the body, right? That's still a change in the microbes in the ear or a change in the microbes that live on your skin. Are the microbes that live on the skin the same ones that are in the gut, or are they influenced by the health of the gut?
They are influenced by the health of the gut. It is a different community, but there is also a gut-skin axis. So how it all relates to the immune system and having it function well. And when the immune system becomes oversensitive and reactive, then you can see all kinds of things arise, including skin conditions.
Okay. And also behavior, right? Behavior. Yes. That can be part of it. So this product that you have is really affecting, it's like the foundation. You fix the foundation, and then everything else that you're doing, food, supplements, exercise, care, that kind of can build on top of that. So actually taking a look at where your dog is right now really would give you a good indication of, am I giving my dog enough fiber? Is the diet that I'm feeding my dog creating health or supporting imbalance? Would that be a correct statement?
That's right. And it's not, you may be feeding them a fantastic diet, but it might need to be tailored to their specific needs, because all of us have a unique microbiome composition based on, early life, like when we were born and what was in the air when we were, toddlers, and things like that all affect the long-term composition.
Exactly.
Holly, can you talk a little bit more about that? I forgot to ask you, how does the microbiome become our microbiome? Are we born with that, or is it an acquired microbiome?
For the most part, we are born without having any microbes in our gut. I mean, they used to think the uterus was sterile. Now we realize that there are some microbes, but it's a low bacterial diversity environment. But the birth canal becomes colonized by Lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. Some of the groups that you do see in probiotics have relatives that you find in the vaginal canal, and it's interesting because it changes prior to birth. So it's pretty interesting that the body's trying to colonize the babies. It's a little bit different with cats and dogs, but similar. We think they probably pick up more from nursing and from the moms licking them, and then just from the environment, playing around and getting exposed to dirt and things like that.
Yeah. So we start with a very undeveloped microbiome, and the birth process, the nursing process, is what seeds the initial microbiome. Wow. in cats and dogs. Over time, food, what they're fed, determines what groups of bacteria grow. If they're giving antibiotics, that will reduce the population of certain bacteria. And so the microbiome sort of can start in one place and change over time. And, ideally it changes to be a more healthy state. They get the right microbes from their mom, they're fed the right food, it stays balanced, and they don't have anything that requires them to take an antibiotic that's going to alter that. That's ideal. For most of us, that's not what happens. Right. So a lot of dogs are born by C-section, like a lot of people.
Yeah.
I believe it's like over 80% of bulldogs are born by C-section.
Right.
That means that initial set of microbes that they would get through a natural birth don't happen.
Wow.
And so then, if their mom doesn't have the right set of microbes because that's the way she was born, then she can't pass the right microbes onto her pups.
Yeah, you're kind of just
Exactly.
weaker and weaker and weaker,
Exactly.
as you kind of go down the line. So really at that point, something like the fecal transfer really is their only option, right? Because you can feed it through food, but if it's already weakened, aren't you just feeding the unbalanced garden, so to speak?
That's absolutely right. And so I'll jump around because I have an example here of a dog that had been, abandoned on the streets in, I believe it was Albuquerque, and really just, was diagnosed with IBD at like 9 months. Okay. And so had many rounds of antibiotics. And what we see in her microbiome is that there are lots of zeros.
Wow.
And so essentially, we call this the case of missing microbes. When a dog doesn't have the microbes in the gut, it's almost impossible to just feed it back to health. And so that's where a fecal transplant is really beneficial. There's some indication that maybe fermented foods can introduce some of these microbes, but from our experience, really the fecal transplant is the most direct way of doing it. And so I'll just talk about one of the other trends we see in the microbiome is high levels of this group here. And it's a long word that's a little hard to pronounce, but it's E. coli. And E. coli is a natural resident of a healthy microbiome of cats and dogs, but it should be at less than 4%. And so if it's up here at 37%,
wow,
it's more likely to cause problems and be the cause of GI distress.
Yeah, I could see that. Wow.
And so most tests that are available to veterinarians don't test for E. coli or this group here, Escherichia, Shigella. And that's because there are lots of different strains of this group, and some are beneficial and some are harmful and some are just, hanging along. But by having a healthy reference set like we do, we're able to identify when this group is not in the right proportion. And so that's one of the values of the test. And what we see is that almost 30% of dogs and 15% of cats that are coming to us complaining of GI distress have very high levels of E. coli. And so that has to be addressed differently. And in fact, the metronidazole, I'll show you another report.
This may be a byproduct of excessive metronidazole use.
So this is our dog Yuki, and she had been on metronidazole for 21 days at this point. And metronidazole, there was a great study out of Texas A&M that came out a few months ago that showed that metronidazole, and Holly, correct me if I get this one wrong, reduces the anaerobic bacteria in the gut. And so some of those are pathogens. So that's what it's intended to do. But some of them, so like Fusobacterium is anaerobic.
And Bacteroides.
Is anaerobic, but they're an essential part of the healthy microbiome. So metronidazole reduces these groups along with other groups that are causing or believed to cause GI distress. But the other thing that happens is that Escherichia or E. coli is opportunistic. It can either be anaerobic or aerobic. Oh. And so if you give a dog metronidazole, E. coli will sort of start to take over because all the other groups of anaerobic bacteria have been reduced. And so
by actually having your microbiome in check, it's actually keeping these other. It's like everybody's checking and balancing each other from getting too overwhelmed. So that's actually where we're talking about the bounce, right? If that microbiome had been more like the column on the left, which was showing a good and healthy colony of different types of bacterias and pathogens and microbes that live in your gut, that metronidazole maybe wouldn't have been would it still create that? So would you want to follow metronidazole up with a fecal transfer just to kind of restore that?
Article on this, I'll let her respond to it.
Yeah. So sort of two things. First, we have a clinical trial going on right now where we're using fecal transplants after the use of Tylosin in dogs that have chronic diarrhea problems. Or chronic enteropathies. And we're doing this for the University of Helsinki to see if we can reduce the use of antibiotics in the treatment of these dogs. And likewise, we think that for metronidazole, that something similar could be done where following the use of metronidazole, if you can recolonize the gut with beneficial microbes from a fecal transplant, maybe you can get off the medical merry-go-round of metronidazole use.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's part of the reason why I love your product, and I'm grateful that we're having this chat today, because I do feel like there are so many applications and that pet parents just need to educate themselves and to use this. Because with this product, if my dog is healthy and I give them the fecal transfer, it's not making them unhealthy, anything, right? I mean, you
Sure.
don't usually see a decline in health with the fecal transfer, do
No.
you?
No, and
No, I tested it when I first developed it on our own dogs to see, like, so Yuki had this problem, but Charlie didn't have any problems. And we certainly had plenty of people who want to do it just to, support their health, add diversity if they can. But there should be, yeah, if they're healthy, there should be no effect. I mean, some dogs like to eat poop. At least this poop we know doesn't have parasites or pathogens.
Yeah, I always wondered that. I have had a couple dogs that have had some chronic GI issues, and they had a sensitive stomach, or they were picky about food. But one of the common things is those same dogs always ate poop. It wasn't just like it was there. It's like they'd watch the other dogs go and run to get it because they knew you were coming for it. So it was really quite interesting to see. Yeah. So you kind of wondered why would they eat it if they didn't need it? I always thought maybe it was the fact that it was sort of pre-digested, that maybe they were having trouble digesting their food. But then that kind of goes back to what you were saying about the report. If those bacteria are out of whack, then you're not creating, is it creating or is it absorbing the vitamins and minerals and that type of stuff from your food if you don't have the right type of bacteria? Is that what's happening?
If you don't have the right type of bacteria or in the right proportion, then they won't be producing the healthy compounds and nutrients and vitamins that your body or your pet's body needs. And so just think of it as like a train stop. Like the food stops at the bacteria train stop, and then the bacteria decides it can go on, right? Okay. And the things that the bacteria produce are what keeps us healthy. And so, yeah, if you're not feeding the right bacteria or you don't have the right bacteria, then odds are they won't be producing the compounds you need. And Melissa, you said something earlier. I just want to come back to it. You were talking about the bounce, and if you have a healthy dog and they take antibiotics, they will recover. That was sort of the thing that we believed up front, and we really focused on sick animals. And going back to that Texas A&M study I mentioned earlier, they actually gave metronidazole to healthy dogs and looked at what happened to the microbiome. And what they found was that 30 days later, those microbiomes didn't recover to the point where they were before. And so they may not end up completely out of whack, but they didn't recover to where they were. And so we're now starting to recommend maybe just a short course of the gut restore supplement after a round of antibiotics, even if there aren't any symptoms, to just address the fact that it's like a bouncing ball. It doesn't quite bounce back to where it was. Right. Yeah. And so that was enlightening for us because we hadn't really studied healthy dogs and administering antibiotics. And so that might be just another place to use it. We now have had over 10,000 cats and dogs do the gut restore supplements. And what we found is that if the animal's healthy or within the range of somewhat sick, there really hasn't been any negative consequences. However, if we have customers where it's like the last ditch effort, they've tried everything else and the pet is really thin or vomiting and not digesting their food, it may not help at that point. It's just sort of too far gone. Right. And so we do caution, if you have a really animal that's really gone through a lot, you're introducing a lot of new microbes. And so we would really encourage you to work with your vet in that case, because it's just, you wouldn't want to do anything that's going to just, make a sick animal worse. We do have some customers that want to do it to change behavior because there is this gut-brain axis. And we've seen improvement of behavior when you have a sick animal and you make it healthier. There's some research that indicates there's a relationship between the microbiome and behavior, but we haven't really seen if you give an anxious dog the microbiome of a calm dog, that you're going to make the anxious dog calm. But there are some people who are trying that. Some vets who are trying that?
I think it depends on what the underlying cause
Yeah.
is. And so we all know that what it feels like to have your gut feel unsettled. And so I can imagine that there is clearly a link there with anxiety and depression, but there can be other factors that are causing this gut imbalance that, may not just be resolved with a fecal transplant. And so we also recommend you make sure that they're healthy. And then also, they may have some behavioral issues that you need to talk to a behaviorist or a trainer about. You need to make sure, right, that you're giving them exercise. All the basic things are just so important, right? They need a schedule, they need good food, they need exercise and fresh air and play. And and before I think you think that like a probiotic or a fecal transplant is going to like cure everything, you have to look at all of these things first.
Yeah. Well, I feel like for myself, what really excited me about that is I feed my dogs raw, but I have also fed kibble. I've fed freeze dried. I have found that while I want it to be one thing and one thing all the time, that it doesn't necessarily work that way. And to have something like this where I could test and see, are they at least in balance with what I'm doing? And then I can make the adjustments. And like you were mentioning, a lot of people think, okay, this is a dog, so that's everybody, all the dogs are all the same. But you're saying they're not. They are unique. Everybody's slightly different. So maybe my golden retriever needs more fiber, whereas my pit bull needs more proteins. What I really feel I'm just really jazzed about is that I can, by testing, I have that baseline.
A lot of our customers feed raw, and this is an example of a dog that was being fed raw, but was still having GI problems. And what you can see here is that the Fusobacterium was very high, 55% compared to the average of 19%. And what we found is that, amongst raw feeders, sometimes they're being fed more muscle meat, organs, and bones, but they're not getting fibers and vegetable matter in the diet. And in these cases, we recommend just adding a little bit of inulin or a little bit of fiber to the diet, and it reduces the relative level of Fusobacterium, and the GI symptoms go away.
Wow.
And so, it's one of those things where, in general, we recommend more protein in a diet, but there is sometimes too much of a good thing. And so knowing exactly how to balance it is one of the things that the reports help identify.
That's amazing. And I think that's really helpful. I mean, people who do raw feeding, and you want to make sure your efforts are beneficial. So having this opportunity to test like this, I think really just gives people an opportunity to establish a nice baseline, a nice foundation. And then once you establish that they've got a healthy gut, then you start adding things. And again, now you have some way to measure at least what it's doing on the inside, something that you couldn't see before that we were just guessing. So this works whether you're on kibble or on raw, right? So Are you seeing, everybody in their own camps it's all one way or no way, right? But are you seeing that it's more even, or are you seeing large differences between what they're fed and the way the microbiome establishes itself?
That's definitely something we've been working on. We did a study a year and a half ago, maybe it's 2 years now, looking at how the microbiome of dogs changes when they go on and off of a raw diet. And then also when we look at our database of dogs, we've definitely compared what does the microbiome look like in healthy dogs on these different diets? How does it differ when they have various health conditions? So in general, what we find is that Fusobacteria tends to be higher in the raw fed dogs, although I think that in part reflects a higher amount of protein in those diets. There are higher protein kibbles. So typically we recommend, if you want to feed kibble, to choose one of the ones that has more protein in it and less carbohydrate. So we think macronutrients are really driving it. But, there are interesting questions around, is a fresh or raw diet, even with the same macronutrients, different? And, does does the microbiome respond to the difference of the moisture and the freshness of the food differently? It turns out to be kind of tricky. You can't design the exact same food in these different formats very easily, because when you make kibble, it changes things. When you cook it, it changes things. So it's, I think, going to be an ongoing area of research for a while. And a problem with prior published studies is that there were different macronutrients in the kibbles versus the raw. So then you didn't know if it was because it was raw or because of the macronutrients, which I think are the biggest driver. But so the groups that do differ are that Prevotella tends to be higher in the kibble-fed dogs. Fusobacteria is higher in raw-fed dogs. So we see some of the core groups of bacteria being somewhat different. So we do take that into account when we make interpretations and give advice.
That's right. And so in our healthy reference, we have dogs that are fed, or dogs and cats that are fed kibble, and really the whole range of foods. And so I think the thing for pet parents to understand is that you can have a healthy dog or cat on kibble and on raw, and everything in between. What we do see is that microbiomes of dogs and cats change as they get older. And it's, one example that I think is quite useful is thinking about a rainforest on an island, and there's storm after storm, and the rainforest gets more and more depleted, becomes less diverse, less resilient after each storm. It's like that with our microbiomes. And so with kibble, we tend to see higher carbohydrate ratios and see higher Prevotella. And if you're monitoring your pet and you're keeping the Prevotella in the healthy range, then it's fine. But if you let the Prevotella get too high, then you run the risk of having an imbalance. It's not just that we're being political. It's that when we look at healthy dogs, they can be on kibble or other foods. But we do think that monitoring the microbiome over time, no matter what diet they're on, is really the key to health, versus, it has to be, home cooked, or it has to be raw, or the only way to avoid pathogens is to be kibble. I think that those paradigms really aren't looking at the core of what we think drives health, which is the microbiome.
That's another reason I thought your product was so exciting, because it kind of does it. You have finally kind of answered the burning question: is what's better? And really what's better is what creates the healthiest microbiome for your dog. So say you did decide to stay with whatever kibble you were feeding, and that Prevotella did start to creep up. Are there recommendations for adding things to the diet to balance it out? And what type of things would those be?
So I think some people are reluctant to change kibbles. I mean, we do recommend first taking a good look at the macronutrient ratio of the kibble that you feed, and making sure it's as high protein as you can get, and investing in a higher quality kibble. I mean, really, right, we all know diet is the foundation of health. And so you don't want to get that low budget kibble. It's really not as good for them.
Right.
Toppers, I think, are great, or adding, fresh meat, raw food to the top of your kibble as a way to enhance the protein in their diet.
And if you did that, would you see more of a balance between the Prevotella and the Fusobacteria then, right? Is the Fusobacteria the protein one?
That's right.
That tend to be lower in a kibble-fed dog?
That's right. And so if you were just adding either a commercial raw or some sort of meat topper to kibble, you would start to see that Fusobacterium come up. Because of the way that food is labeled, most people actually don't know how many carbohydrates are in their pet's food, right? Yeah. Because they tell you protein, they tell you fiber, they tell you fat, but they don't tell you carbohydrates. Right. And one of the reasons for that is carbohydrates are cheaper than proteins. And so if you look at a basic value basic value kibble, they can be as high as 65 or 70% carbohydrate.
Yeah.
If you look at a premium kibble, you can actually find carbohydrate levels at 35 or 38%. So that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Most commercial raw diets or carbohydrates are around 30%, or even sometimes even lower. And so
even grain-free, some of them.
Right.
So,
I wondered about that. So do you see a difference in the bacterial composition of pets on grain-free foods, which are really high in pea and lentils, as opposed to maybe pets that are on a kibble that has maybe rice or oatmeal or oats or something like that? Do you see a difference in the composition of the gut?
I think that's a really interesting thing to look at. I mean, most of the people who are sending their samples into us are dealing with a chronic illness, which you really need to do those studies with healthy animals to understand how the healthy system responds.
So healthy pet parents, get your samples in so that they can start, getting the answers to these questions so our pets can be healthier and we can spend our money on the things that actually create health rather than, what we think might create health. So the more samples you get, the more information that you'll have to share. So that'll be wonderful. Can you tell the difference in a dog that is fed cooked protein as opposed to raw?
There was a study that came out like a year and a half ago that did find some differences there. I think some of the problems though is that the macronutrients were different in the different kinds of foods that were studied. So there's still research ongoing to really try to answer that. So I would look for papers coming out in 2021 and 2022 to try and really answer that. Okay. We have been doing some research on that, but I don't have any results that I can share today. But on that note, I think that when dogs age and they start to produce like fewer digestive enzymes or pancreases aren't functioning as well, then shifting them to a lightly cooked or cooked diet may be beneficial when they start to age. But I think that a raw diet is more natural. I mean, dogs did co-evolve with us. And so eating some of our scraps is normal. We don't tend to recommend it because we think people tend to feed like junk and, beat the crust to their dog. And that's really not part of a balanced, healthful diet, but it's not going to like kill them. They've certainly been around living with humans and eating human discards for thousands of years.
Yeah. Have you worked with dogs on a ketogenic diet?
We have tried a raw diet that's ketogenic for our dogs and looked at the microbiome responses. And actually, interestingly, in terms of that, it seemed like our dogs could switch easily between a sort of another commercial raw that we like a lot and this ketogenic version. There was I was worried that the extra fat in ketogenic might cause issues in older dogs, but they seemed fine on either one. And in terms of microbiome composition, I didn't see a large effect, but I am really interested in how that, I think maybe we need to do like a study where we can pull out smaller effects.
Yeah. I've actually gone keto with my guys for multitudes of reasons. So I was curious about that. My guys, it's like a little home experiment all the time.
Yeah. And the other thing that makes it complicated is that with older dogs, so we have one dog that is almost 13, another that's almost 10. I think for a lot of people, those are considered senior or geriatric dogs. Right. We still think of them as being pretty young, but the older one just gets picky. His GI system is fine. He just doesn't want to eat duck for a little while. And so sometimes, there is the preferences of the animal that you have to take into account as much.
So do you see in a normal healthy dog, as they age, do you see some changes in the microbiome if I have an older dog, would using a fecal transplant and doing the testing that you offer be really beneficial for them?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of like there's a ratchet that happens in terms of lifetime and antibiotic and medication exposure, and that you just start to winnow down the diversity of microbes, and it's hard to get that back. Certainly, you can get some from playing in soil and being outside, and letting them eat goose poop or whatever. But I think a fecal transplant offers a way to give them beneficial microbes in a safer, more controlled way.
Yeah, and we have one vet that is adding microbiome testing to their annual wellness exam, in particular for the seniors.
Right.
because it's a great check to make sure that they're being fed properly. But also, the microbiome can be an early warning sign of a health condition. And so monitoring it, particularly as your pets get older, is a good idea.
So does the muscle wasting that you see as dogs get older, do you see that reflected in the microbiome? Can you reverse some of that by balancing the microbiome, or is it just tend to be a fact of aging?
I think it's a complicated syndrome that can arise, but I think higher protein diets are really important for that, and maintaining exercise levels. I mean, they certainly found with people that strength training can really make a difference for supporting the muscles, but it does tend to happen with aging.
Right.
Yeah, and so part of what's going on there is that the digestive tract is not breaking down the protein as well as pets age. And there can be causes for that that are non-age related. And so, sort of recognizing the problem, we would see that signature in the microbiome with Fusobacterium being very low. We'll see that. And then working with your vet, thinking about how to address that. And so are they actually getting enough protein, but then just not digesting it? Or are they not getting enough protein and thus you just need to increase the protein levels? And if they are getting enough protein, but they're not digesting it, then are digestive enzymes appropriate to help them digest that protein?
Or maybe before that, consider having it be a cooked protein.
Right.
It's easier for them to digest.
Pre-digested protein. Okay. And so, but yeah, particularly as pets get older, that muscle wasting is an important thing to watch, and you see it in the microbiome long before you see it actually in the physical aspect of the animal.
Well, that's great.
I brought up the exercise too, because when they start to become arthritic, they don't want to move around as much. And we found with our senior Yuki that we did underwater treadmill, and that was actually really beneficial to help her build back up some of that muscle mass.
Yeah, getting them to move, they get so quiet and low key, you can start to overlook the fact that they need exercise. And I think that some of what I did with my guys, they're not old, they're both 6, but when COVID hit, it was ball city and let's play 24/7. And now they're broken and we have to minimize our time. So it created a whole nother, you really do need to use it on a regular basis, or you will pull and strain and hurt yourself. But the fact that this test can also be really beneficial for our older dogs, our seniors, to kind of get a glimpse of what's happening maybe before something physically manifests is also a plus. I did want to ask 2 questions because I don't want to forget the second one. So first, are there medications besides antibiotics that can negatively affect the microbiome? And then the second question is do you see changes that can identify certain disease processes such as cancer or anything like that in the microbiome changes?
I think, there was research done a few years back where they actually looked at how different medications affect beneficial microbes that had been isolated from the human gut microbiome. It would be great to do this with dog-specific species, but these are close relatives of the ones in dogs and cats. And they did both human medications and veterinary medications, and they found that something like 80% of them did have a negative effect on these beneficial microbiome members. And particularly antiparasitics, antibacterial, of course, right, would have a strong effect. But other medications like NSAIDs, pain relievers that we use commonly in our pets can have an effect. But of course, if you have to sort of weigh the balance of having them be in chronic pain, right? And can you manage it another way, or is that useful? So, and important for them not to be suffering. So you have to sort of recognize that sometimes you have to give a medication, even if it may require you to provide some additional support for the microbiome.
Yeah, but at least then so if you're so it's not that you can't use NSAIDs or pain medications, but you're pretty much assured that it's going to make some changes. So now you know, so do some testing, and then you'll have to figure out, you know, because your product is kind of flexible, right? So you can use it all at once if you're having some major GI health or those types of issues, but it can also be used in dogs just to kind of restore maybe a minor imbalance. But can it also be used maybe like just for a couple weeks after an antibiotic treatment, or would you recommend a full 30-day course? And then I'm sorry, I'm talking again, but and then say if my dog is on Remedil every day for right now, how would I best use the fecal transplant material to support that? How fast does the microbiome change when you're using things like that? I think maybe is.
There are a lot of great questions in there.
Sorry, yeah, well, rewind, right?
Maybe we'll work backwards. I mean, we think that if you just had a course of antibiotics, I think that a week or two should be sufficient. The microbiome should respond within a couple weeks to it, especially because you've just really knocked things down there. And so it's primed to have beneficial organisms colonize. Then if you're on something like Rimadyl every day, what do? I think you could test and take a look at the microbiome results and decide if you can support that with diet, if occasionally providing some additional microbes with the FMT capsules would be beneficial, or the gut restore supplement. I think you'd want to just take a look at the individual and see how they're responding. Maybe they're fine. I think that some dogs respond better than others to these medications, and so some of them may be fine, but we're concerned about the ones that like are going to be going into other health conditions because they can't support the right microflora on that medication. And so it's good to try and be aware of it and get it before. We want to really try and prevent some of these problems before they start.
Yeah. So I would describe what you're talking about in terms of doing the gut restore supplements when there isn't a problem, but they've encountered antibiotics or something like that. Generally, 1 capsule a day, 7 to 14 days is what we'd recommend there. You shouldn't really see an effect like physically, but you might see an effect if you did the testing. Whereas if you have an animal that's on, is starting to take an NSAID or some other drug, it's hard to say how long it's going to take for that to have a negative effect on the microbiome. With food, typically we say wait 30 days and then look at what the microbiome looks like at that point. So if they just started taking a drug, wait at least 2 or 4 weeks and then measure the microbiome at that point and see if there's a problem that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
Yeah, and I probably recommend testing more often, like every 6 months, just to keep an eye on things.
Yeah.
How fast does the microbiome change?
Well, I mean, there's like small changes, but can happen like daily, but we're really focused on the core beneficial microbes. So those are fairly consistent. And they're very consistent. That's why we sort of really focus on them. And so we shouldn't see big changes, except for after antibiotics, it's pretty fast because it's like really knocked down and it's going to come back up within a couple weeks. That's why it was pretty shocking with that study where 30 days out, they were still seeing depletions because they hadn't helped them to restore. And they just thought maybe that would happen on their own. And I think they did also show that FMT, of course, aids in recovery faster. But yeah, I think with diet, we usually say like, give it a month and then you can recheck and see if you need to make any adjustments.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now with diet, you were talking about fermented foods. Are there certain recommendations or certain things that people do that you do see can help support the microbiome? And what would those be?
Yeah, no, so fermented foods are definitely going to support diversity in the microbiome. We're a big fan of those products. They're fantastic. And they're food-based microorganisms. So they're not like FMT, but they, I think, are a really great supplement.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we're big fans of those, like from a conceptual perspective, but there really haven't been any studies in cats and dogs that show the effect of those foods on the microbiome, but like conceptually, they should be beneficial to the microbiome. We have seen some fermented foods that seem to really increase the amount of Bacteroides, which I mentioned earlier is a group that produces anti-inflammatory compounds. But the challenge is that it's dosage, like how much of the fermented food is required to get the desired effect. And so I think there's still work to be done there. But conceptually, we're big fans of it.
Well, with the exception of of course, like yeast fermentate has been studied quite extensively because it's been around for a long time in sort of health food, and brewer's yeast and other nutritional yeast. And those, I think the yeast body walls are actually cell walls are actually feed beneficial microbes in the microbiome. That's and right. They do seem to promote immune function. So there has been a lot of work done with sort of purified yeast fermentate. And I would expect that some of these fermented foods may have similar effects, but they just haven't been studied yet.
And when you say studied, was that in people or in dogs?
Well, that has been studied for the yeast fermentate. It's been studied in people and dogs.
Oh, okay.
So much of the research is done in people. We like to say they're the model system for the dogs.
Usually it's the other way around.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So the recommendations that we make in our report for increasing fiber, those recommendations are from the literature that Holly and her team have reviewed. And a significant amount of that literature is in humans. But because we're mammals, we should work in a similar way as dogs.
Right.
But I think when we're talking about there's more work to be done, that's really looking at a particular thing in dogs or in cats.
Yeah. All of this is really fascinating. And so when a pet takes the fecal product, it's by mouth, it's in a capsule, right? Should we open that capsule and place it on food, or is it coated in such a way to make you don't want it in the stomach, right? You want it to open up in the intestinal tract?
That's right. It's enteric coated so that it can pass through the stomach acid and then open when it gets into the intestines.
Okay. Because otherwise it would be killed off in the stomach for the most part?
I think because these organisms were historically, prior to medicine and veterinary medicine arising, dogs, I think, would repopulate their guts by eating poop and in the wild, that I think some of these organisms would pass through the stomach and still be able to colonize. But this way we know that we've protected them from the stomach acid and that they can get delivered to either the small or large intestine.
Oh, that's great.
I mean, for cats, people sometimes have trouble giving their cats the pill. Usually we don't find it too hard with our dogs. Some dogs are pretty wily, but if you whatever method you use to give them a pill, if it's a pill pocket or cheese or peanut butter, if you give it to them sometimes without any pills in it, then they are more likely to take it when you have to give them a pill.
Smart.
Right?
That's really smart. Yeah.
Right. And so we have two sizes of capsules. We have the size 0, which is for dogs larger than 20 pounds. And we have size 4, which is for dogs smaller than 20 pounds and cats.
Oh, nice. So it is scaled.
Smaller size makes it much easier for smaller animals.
But if they're 4 pounds, then it's even a little bit big for them. So then we recommend that you open it up and maybe mix it with some wet food or some kind of gravy or broth or something and syringe it into them, because they will know that it contains fecal material and they probably wouldn't want to eat it.
They may just refuse the food. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then with dogs, they want to choose the poop that they eat.
Right. Yeah.
Most dogs do anyway.
Who knew, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I actually wanted to ask, because I had forgotten to ask before. So when you were talking about having a very sick animal and how that they may not respond to the pills, are fecal transplants actually available at veterinarians? I mean, is that a thing that you can do? And is that a rectal administration of that?
Yeah, we work with a number of veterinarians, and one of the nice things about working with your veterinarian in this process is that they will be thinking about everything that's going on with the pet, and they'll be able to make a decision about is the right delivery to be done via enema or capsules. There are really different theories about how they work. The enema delivery works much more quickly.
Right.
Okay. It might, because it works more quickly, whereas the capsules are sort of seeding over time. There are scenarios where the capsules might be more effective. And so, and then we have some vets that do both. Okay. And we make our material available to vets to do perform the enema, because a lot of times vets don't do it because they don't have a reliable source of material that's been pre-screened.
Right.
And so, so I won't say that every vet does it, but most holistic or integrative vets are familiar with the procedure. And if they don't do it, they'll be able to recommend a vet that does.
And if you are working with a really sick pet and you are trying to balance this, the vet can reach out to your team through email, right? And they can talk to you. Yep. And do you have like a core group of vets that you do work with? So say I'm working with my vet who absolutely just will not even think about this. Can I contact you, and do you have like a network of people that you could suggest?
Yes.
Okay. We do. The U.S. is a big country, right? And we're still pretty early in our life cycle as a company, but we have about 250 vets throughout the U.S. that regularly use our products, and 2 or 3 times that are at least familiar with it and recommend it. And so, if for some reason your vet doesn't do it, we can help you find a vet that can help.
That's wonderful, because sometimes that's a real problem. I never expect one person to be everything I need, so, and everybody has their own opinion. So if you don't like that part, but I like everything else about you, then I just won't ever ask you about that part. You know what I mean? That's right. So you do have to kind of balance, but in this instance, it's nice to know that you actually have some resources so the person isn't kind of just back to square one if their vet isn't on board. And that also brings me back to the question of pets with cancer and chronic illnesses. Are you able to see that in the microbiome specifically?
Yeah, so we are still working on sort of identifying signatures of different conditions like that. We focused initially a lot on the inflammatory bowel disease, and there definitely are unique markers associated with that. And also GI lymphoma. There are other conditions that we're working on. I think pancreatitis has a really strong signature, which kind of makes sense given this role in producing important digestive enzymes. So it depends on the condition. In human medicine, there's certainly more and more research coming out finding basically a bacterial biomarker associated with a number of health conditions. So it's an active area of research for us and for others.
So there's more to come. See, there's still more to come. So when you were talking about having the fecal transplant seed, and you were also saying that sometimes it's fast, but sometimes it takes a while. If we're thinking about the microbiome, just let me know if I have this right. If I'm thinking about the microbiome kind of as a garden or a rainforest, some of the stuff will take root pretty quickly, but other things may need to take root and give time to grow. And then not only do you have to grow, but kind of like maybe like a depleted soil, you've got to give the mucosa time to heal. So that's not just, this is the first step, especially in GI issues, but there may be some additional support that you need to do. And that healing may not happen just right here. It may actually, you may be watching it over the course of a little bit of time. Is that generally what you see?
Well, yeah. So there are certainly people who report like miraculous overnight responses. And a clear example, I think, is like puppies with Parvo seem to respond very, very rapidly, and they're in a very severe state. But for some of these chronic GI conditions, some of them respond fast, but others, I think more typically would take longer because they have to go through that healing process. And I definitely use similar metaphors for that, thinking about it as being a garden that you need to restore the soil and the mucosal lining. And in some cases, maybe you can't restore it if they have like an autoimmune condition. But but they've been having like a reaction to a food, and you can change them to a food that they're not reactive to, and then you can rebuild the system. It just takes time, right? And until the digestive tract, is like the size of a tennis court, right? It's like it's massive, yeah. And so it takes time.
Yeah, and so these are sort of rough numbers, but I think about half of our customers, well, in our pilot study of 112 cats and dogs with IBD or suspected IBD, over 80% saw an improvement in the clinical signs, fecal consistency, things like that.
Over 30 days.
Over 30 days.
That's so wonderful.
Thanks.
It really
is. And so, but when we looked at like the 20% that didn't show improvement, or the percent that regress over time, the way it sort of plays out is about half of our customers, even if they've been diagnosed with IBD or some other chronic GI ailment, they see like improvement in like 7 to 14 days, and it becomes sustained improvement. There is a group where they see improvement when they're taking the capsules, but then when they go off the capsules, the pet regresses. And one of the reasons why we encourage the testing is because if you do the before test and you do the after test and your pet regresses, we have a roadmap as to what changed. And one of the big things we see is this high level of E. coli, and the gut restore supplements or fecal transplants can improve the clinical signs when they're taking the capsules. But if they have high levels of E. coli, often that E. coli blooms again. And so that's when we recommend this other product to be used in conjunction with the fecal transplant to eliminate that high E. coli. So if you have a sick dog and you're part of the 50% where like you do one round and everything's great, that's awesome. But we do encourage the testing, because if you're in that other group, knowing what happened, what didn't happen, and whether another round makes sense or another supplement is warranted is what the testing can help with. So, it's not a magic bullet or silver bullet, but
vampires, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it does help. But really, the testing is what guides how to get your pet back on that path to healthy.
We've been talking about medications and things like that causing problems in the microbiome, but are there herbs and supplements that can do the same? Have you come across any that the microbiome just isn't really keen on?
That's a good question. I think we haven't really come across a lot. I think we are concerned that if you have a healthy dog and you give them a high dose probiotic every day, that might deplete their beneficial microbes just by competing. Like if you're doing millions of spores every day, like that those spores have to eat something if they're active, and they can be taking away from the native microbes. But we haven't seen, like there was some concern about oils or other things. We haven't really seen any negative with like fish oils, coconut oils. I think more research has to be done on a lot of supplements to really understand. But the main thing that comes to mind is just like high dosage of probiotics or something that we're concerned about, because we really want to help support these native gut flora.
Right. Okay. And there's a company, I think it might be Purina, who does a probiotic, a single strain probiotic that is supposed to help with behavior. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of this?
Yes.
Would that cause similar issues? Have you even, I haven't really heard how dogs are responding. Have you heard any information on this?
So they did do a pilot study, but they haven't published a study yet on that product. It's some people find it beneficial. There's certainly lots of mouse model research showing that some probiotics can definitely help reduce anxiety. Some of my thoughts on using probiotics for this purpose, including this one, are that this one, you are competing with native microbes, and we don't yet have a peer-reviewed paper showing that this one works. They also have a food additive in there that may or may not be what you want to be feeding your pets, depending on the source of this sort of protein enhancing flavor that they add to it. Wasn't something that I really wanted to give my dogs on a regular basis. I did try it with our rescue dog who had a lot of behavioral issues. Generally, I recommend, first you make sure they're healthy, see the vet, if they have behavioral issues, talk to your trainer. Like there are things you can do to reduce like separation anxiety and how you keep them in the house. I mean, one thing we did for years, which was foolish, but our trainer had to point it out, was like we let our dogs like bark in the window all day long because I don't know, we had to crate train them and sort of, she's like, you can't expect them to act perfectly on walks if you're letting them go crazy in the house. But we didn't think about it because we were busy and they protected the house. People weren't going to rob us.
That's funny. Yeah. I remember when my sister, when her dogs were little, she would let them run up over them on the couch. He's a silver lab. He's going to get big. I'm like, Patty, this is going to hurt. I mean, like, we can't let this happen. But she was like, oh, yeah. So it is. Sometimes it just takes that person from the outside looking in to be like, to give you the information you need. That's funny.
Yeah. And so it shouldn't be the first line of defense, even because it's easy. You just get a sachet and you put it in there.
Yeah, no, that's a big deal.
I think having a healthy functioning gut is going to be calming. So I don't think you need to buy a special probiotic for that if the gut microbiome is healthy.
That's good to know. Yeah. And about training, like right now I'm in a training issue with one of my dogs, but it's me. It's not him. It's me. Mm-hmm. And fixing yourself, I mean, goodness gracious, just step back and think about how hard it is to fix yourself, and then you'll be a little bit kinder on yourself when you're taking care of others. So yeah, it can be very challenging. So I actually have one of your kits here. I think this is one of your original kits. Mm-hmm. I'm such a dork, I wanted to do it and I wanted to send it in, but I have 2 dogs. So if I have to get 2 stool samples, what do? Do I just get one, put it in the fixidant, and then wait for the other one? Will that first one go bad? How do I handle that if I have 2 dogs?
So yeah, the sample tubes that come in the kit have fixative in it. So they're stable for months once you put the poop in there.
At room temperature.
Yeah, it's no problem.
So I would just collect the first stool, put it in there, and then keep it at room temperature. Basically just put it back in the envelope that we're going to be mailing it back in until I can get the second one. All right.
Yeah, just so keep it nice and tight.
Okay. Now, what if I, for some reason, like you wouldn't want to refrigerate the poop to put into a vial for later? Could that degrade the sample?
I think as long as it's within like 24 hours, that's fine. I mean, you may not want to put poop in your fridge. I certainly have done it plenty of times, but I know I'm not normal.
I'm not normal either. There are people who need hazmat suits for the idea of picking up their dog's stool, and I'm good with it. So okay. So the kit comes with directions. Mm-hmm. And I guess what I'll do is, instead of doing this one by one, let me just, you come with gloves, right? So I would put the gloves on in order to collect the sample. This one had paper towel.
The tubes would have been in that paper towel.
I moved them. Okay.
After you get the tubes, you put them in.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Now there are 3 tubes in this one. Was I thinking that when it said a 2 test? So I was thinking it was 2 dogs, but was it a before and after for 1 dog?
Oh, it can be either way. We do have new booklets. So they're more explain things in much more detail. Okay. So we used to send an extra sample tube because sometimes people would spill one and then we didn't want them to have to wait while we mailed them another one.
Oh, perfect.
But now what we're doing is we're having you, when you collect a sample, put it into 2 tubes and then send them both back to us. So that way we have a backup in case there's the first sample, for some reason we have trouble in the lab with getting a good amount of DNA out of that initial sample. We have another one that we can go to. So you'll get 2 tubes for each dog or each cat that you're getting samples from. And so that's why you have 3, is that you have 1 extra just in case.
Perfect.
We'll find them a little hard to...
And then this is actually the sterile cotton tip.
Yeah, so we basically recommend that you maybe use poop bag, pick up the poop, and then you sort of, using a surface area, open up the poop bag, but you can sort of contain the poop within the bag to try and keep things clean. We actually provide a wooden stick now, so you can sort of break open the poop, and then you use the swab to collect some poop that's on the inside, so it didn't get soil or grass on it, to just keep the sample as uncontaminated as possible. And then you scoop up like a pea-sized amount and put it into the sample tube.
Okay. And then once we're done with that, we put it into the mailer, right? And mail it back to you.
Well, you need to screw the cap on really tightly and put it in the plastic baggie with the absorbent toweling, so that it doesn't leak on the mail delivery person who might be scared if there's moisture coming out of
oh no. Sounds like this might have happened. Okay. So everybody, put the lid back on very tightly, and then place everything back in the baggie before placing it in the mailer. Another thing you can do is, if you're a little bit squeamish about picking up your dog's poop and moving through it, find a friend, phone a friend. You've got somebody in your life who does not care and who would be more than happy to help you. Is there any more pieces to the kit that I don't have now?
Nope, that's it. But we do have vets that work with us as well. And so, you can just bring your vet the bag of poop and they can send the sample in.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And then I purchased the kit that actually had, so there was some literature that came with it, telling me a bit more about, thanking me for my purchase and telling me a bit more about it. And then I did have the gut restoration supplement. Now this one was a long time ago, people. Took my time, but I did notice now that you have regular ones and then you have raw fed ones. Is there a marked difference between the two that might cause an issue for my dogs that are not on kibble?
The dogs that are on kibble are on a high protein, very high quality kibble. And so, well, you may actually have a raw bottle. We don't know. I mean, I can look at, you can tell me the code on the bottom and I can look it up for you. Okay. We always had both. We just didn't advertise it. But some vets prefer to have more conventionally fed donors. And then there are a lot of people who prefer to have a raw fed donor. So we just decided to make it very clear so people knew which they were purchasing. You were always able to contact us and make a request, but now we've made it more easy for you to do it on the website.
Yeah, the basic idea is that, and the reason we have two different ones is, there's some vets that are in opposition to raw feeding, right? And so we need to have a product that isn't from raw donors.
Right.
There are also some people who feed raw, and they're not just feeding raw, they're also thinking about the ingredients that they're giving their pet, right? And so if they're going through the extra effort and expense of making sure that their pet isn't getting food that has ingredients that they don't want, like that might be filler and kibble, right, then if they would prefer to choose a donor that is being fed the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that.
But all of the donors have healthy, balanced microbiomes, and we test them monthly for not just parasites and pathogens, but also that the microbiome has a nice balanced diversity to it.
Do you only use local donors, or if people are interested in becoming a donor for your program, should they reach out for you, or do you need to be local?
So right now we have donors in two locations. One is the Bay Area and the other is Portland. It is more complicated to have a remote donor. And what I will say, though, is that if any of your listeners have healthy dogs that they think that they would be good donors, I'd love to get them tested and have them contribute to our healthy reference set.
Yeah.
And so reach out to us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's, if you really think you have a dog with golden poo, reach out to us and we'll see what it looks like.
Now, are you seeing that, are most of your donors young dogs, or do you have like a wide range of pets?
It's true. Most of them are young, just because we tend to find the best microbiomes in younger animals, but we have age cutoffs for sure, because it's hard to know when things start to develop in older dogs. So yeah, typically younger, but there are some that are like 5 or 6.
Yeah,
And
I wondered about that.
we did get a sample from a 24-year-old dog.
What?
Not a donor, but
No,
just a 24-year-old dog, and his microbiome looked pretty good.
Wow. Did he have anything like super special that you hadn't ever seen before?
Not that we could tell, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow, that's amazing, and a good quality of life, and to that age, that's everybody's goal, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I wish my dogs lived that long.
I know. It's absolutely heartbreaking how short the time that they have with us is. Well, this has been so fantastic. I have just completely enjoyed myself. Both of you are so delightful, and I cannot thank you enough for all of your time and your knowledge. I could sit here for another long while picking your brains and knowing what you know. I just think it's wonderful. So thank you so much. Everybody can find you at animalbiome.com. And I will go ahead and link that below. The kits are available under the shop tab on your website. It's very easy, very informative. You can read through everything. It's super simple. Is there anything else that I can mention or link for you?
Nope, just tell all your listeners it takes guts to be healthy.
It does take guts to be healthy. That's so fantastic. I love that.
And feel free to email us at team@animalbiome.com. We're happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Please don't forget that this is an interactive podcast. This episode happened to have a lot of information that made it really long, so I have broken it up into some pieces. So you're definitely going to want to head over to YouTube to check those out. If you have liked this episode, please hit the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode. Stay happy.